I finished this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. One of the constructs Dan Sullivan talks about is the gap and the gain. Too much gain thinking or optimism early on in a startup stage, you're dead meat. But later on, as we become maybe more grizzled and like more, gap oriented, I think adapting a little gain optimism into the mix is really healthy.
You got to accentuate the positive, line it to negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In-Between.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Netflix and Warner Brothers, optimism, and cybersecurity. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 512, Linked Wagons. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matthew Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have the one and only Mr. Henry Clifford. He's the president of Livewire and a co-founder of Paracel. How are you, sir?
Great, Matt. Great to be with you. Happy holidays.
Same to you. The next person we have on the show today is my good friend, Mr. Jeremy Glowacki. He's the editor-in-chief of Projector Central. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Matt. Trying to stay warm. It's like Canada weather here right now in the Midwest. So
it's chilly. I was leaving the house today to go out and try and get a little hunt in, and it was 2 degrees Fahrenheit before the wind chill. It was chilly, and I didn't get anything. So, it was a win-win for me. All right, gentlemen, we're going to kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. Netflix's $82.7 billion bid for Warner Brothers sets up the market for a new era in streaming. Netflix was one of, I think, 3 main competitors that were competing for this bid on Warner Brothers from Discovery. They've got the initial approved bid. This is going to go through some regulatory stuff, which I don't think is going to mess with it, but you never know. Go read through the article. There's a bunch of interesting things in it as far as what Netflix is actually buying with that content bundle, if you will. The bottom line is we're probably going to see some massive consolidation of those platforms from standalone entities into specific ones. It'll be tabs. It'll be like every other consolidation that's happened in streaming the last little bit. Henry, let me start with you on this. There's a bunch of interesting and, I'll be blunt, questionable call outs in the article as far as how this is affecting our channel, which again is a good take. I don't think it's going to affect our channel much at all, other than this is going to just add another question that customers have for us when it comes to streaming platforms and the utilization, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see, beyond a content conversation, this impacting us at all?
No, not much. Unfortunately, seems like as choice diminishes, the quality of things tends to sort of go down. I mean, I think we all deluded ourselves into like that the over the top era was going to be an opportunity to take it to big cable. And I think we've just found a way to spend $10 a month 20 or 30 times, and instead of paying one vendor $200 a month. So no, we'll just keep getting questions. We'll keep seeing content wars and channels going dark for a month, and YouTube TV issuing us a $20 credit because some content deal. At the end of the day, I mean, it seems like the video folks have better lawyers than the music folks. Because when I want to listen to music, I just open up Apple Music and I can listen to music. This video thing's ridiculous. You got this content over here and this content. Can you imagine doing that with music? Makes no sense. So they have better lawyers, and as a result, we have a degraded experience. And so I don't expect that to improve anytime soon in quality or in UX.
I love that point, because with music, there really is a handful of standouts. Like Garth Brooks is not available on Apple Music because he's got an exclusive with Amazon, which is ridiculous. More power to Garth, but it's freaking annoying. Jeremy, when you see this, the content issue that I've heard talked about a little bit is, to Henry's point, there's some stuff that has exclusivity with certain platforms, whether it's owned by Warner Brothers or not. We're talking about that becoming kind of part of an issue here. I know one of the things that I actually was oddly enough following was there's two wrestling platforms, I guess, WWE and another one, and they're on the competing platforms right now. One is on Warner Brothers and WWE is on Netflix. And I guess the companies hate each other. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens with that content once it's all under the Netflix umbrella, if you will. Is it our job to educate customers on where they can find streaming shows? Like, and I say that because I've had this conversation way too many times. And part of that's because I live in Canada.
Yeah, I don't think that your average person is going to need that much handholding, but we're talking about high net worth individuals who want handholding on most of their technology needs there, I think. So I could see that being the case, where it's kind of good to know what platforms are most important and helping set that up for your client. But knowing which shows are on which platform, that goes a little too far, maybe. I do like the consolidation idea just because of what Henry was saying, and you were talking about the music and all of that. But I'm a kind of grew up a TV addict almost. Like, I just watched way too much TV as a kid and into my early 20s. And I've gotten to the point now where I just don't have a lot that makes me want to turn things on and watch programming, because you're jumping all over the place. You can't quite remember what it was that you were in the midst of streaming and where you found it, because there are so many different platforms. For a while, I was just saying, I'm only going to subscribe to 3 or whatever the number was. It's like I just put my foot down. And then I just got to the point, winter hits and you're like, I'm subscribing to all of them. What's another $10? It's like ridiculous. And, you take it so far as even sports. Like, you're talking about wrestling, which it's entertainment, not really a sport, but
it's something.
Yeah. But last year, my favorite NBA team, did very well, the Pacers. And I just refused to pay for the streaming service because it was like $15 a month. And I'm like, that's too expensive. And it's ridiculous, because if it's your like main source of entertainment and it's on like four times a week or whatever it is, it's worth it, Yeah. But like HBO, I know there are good things on there. And, the Max they got the whole Max thing where they rebranded, but I rarely go there because there's not something that's drawing me there. Yeah. Now, if I would check Netflix a little bit more, now that there maybe going to be one app, it's going to make my ideas for where to look for programming easier. I don't know if it's going to drive business to people wanting more like home entertainment systems that they can enjoy. Oh, wow, now our streaming is simplified, so therefore I'm going to hire a home theater expert and come in and make this whole thing for me.
That's the play, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't think that's it, but maybe it is just giving our industry a little bit of a nudge toward, hey, look at this focus on the home platforms. And, I don't think there's ever going to be that competition for the movie theaters again. It is what it is. I'm glad it's surviving, but it's not like that's going to just suddenly take off and no one's going to watch movies at home anymore. That's where people really want to watch their movies, I think. So they're going to want to have a good experience, whether that's a big TV that they bought themselves or they're going to hire someone to come in and put together a great, projection system in a home theater, whatever it is. But I do think it's going to be an interesting simplification, hopefully, for for your average person who likes streaming services. I think there's a lot of people that still don't understand like the whole, switch from cable to streaming and how you can get live TV. That's where the hand holding needs to take place, like the whole YouTube TV and the Hulu with live TV. That's still confusing to a lot of people of how that works. Like, streaming your television programming, not just Netflix and that type of thing.
I love when you guys come on here and remind me how much I hate Canadian telcos because we don't have any of that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to live through that experience of decoupling from the cable company to really know how complicated it is and how you're no longer channel surfing, you're menu surfing, you're back and forth from the menu. It's hard.
I was in Michigan last week and I was trying to watch the Thursday night game, which is on Amazon Prime. And we don't get it on Prime in Canada. So I was in, again, Michigan and went, oh, this would be great. I'll watch it on Prime in Michigan. Yeah, it doesn't work with a Canadian account when you're in Michigan, even when it thinks you're in Michigan. So that was a fun 30 minutes of configuring all the different VPNs and things to make it work so I could watch it in Michigan. That was fun. All right, gentlemen, let's change topics. This comes to us from Residential Systems. This story, Optimist. It's a great article by our friend Tony over there. He was on the Flywheel podcast with Brent and Matt, talking a little bit about trends within the industry. And he kind of made the statement that he thought the industry was going strong and felt a little, as I put words in his mouth, sheepish over his optimism about that. Jeremy, let me start with you on this. He's talking about how he was optimistic and he felt bad about it because he's typically a pessimistic person at heart, but he's just been real positive on the channel. Is there a place for pessimism in business?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to have your contingencies set up ahead of time. So I think our industry has been really bad about jumping on a wave of business and thinking the good times are just going to last forever. And then, of course, there's always a twist where, the housing bubble bursts or there's a supply chain hiccup and everybody's waiting, or there's COVID, which is everybody's dealing with that at one point. But there always seems to be these factors that we're so affected by discretionary spending in our industry that I feel like we're very vulnerable to these fluctuations. So that's where you need to be prepared for, to be pessimistic of, it's not going to last forever or maybe very long at all. So do well while things are going well, but, have your contingencies set up for having to scale your staffing if things tighten up, adjusting your product mix for the future. We've talked ad nauseum about lighting and power, and Tony mentions that in the article, and how these trends that kind of keep you from being that discretionary item, but more of the builder element of the project can maybe help to offset. Also, the commercial residential mix, we talk about that for years, having that blend so that one is down, the other one picks the other one up. They don't typically end up down at the same time. So I don't know if that really answers exactly how you wanted me to answer in terms of like being pessimistic, but I think it's about being guarded and protective of what future challenges are ahead of you.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, Henry, you are one of the most optimistic people I know. Being optimistic in business is fantastic, but how do you balance that with a light dose, shall we say, of reality?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. I finished this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Amazing. And one of the constructs Dan Sullivan talks about is the gap and the gain. And he says, I've interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs over my time coaching entrepreneurs. And he said, most entrepreneurs are stuck in the gap. And he talks about, you're always measuring yourself against this ideal state, and you never achieve it, and so therefore you're just always miserable. And to some extent, that is a somewhat pessimistic or unobtainium kind of way to live. So he calls that the gap. And then he said, but the gain is like, well, we didn't achieve that, but look how far we came this year. Like, I have a services, like a pricing tool called Price Guide I invested in with Marcus Sheridan. And this year we went 10X with that company. We grew 900%. We also missed one of our kind of more gap kind of goals. But from a gain perspective, we went 10X and grew 900%. However, back to your point in the gap and the gain, I think early on, I think we're all probably have a natural state, right? Like a natural set point. We're either gain or gap, like somewhere between the two, right? Is our set point. I think that an entrepreneur early on, I would take any day more of a gap, natural state person, and layer on adapted state gain thinking than I would somebody who's so optimistic. Because you could optimistically auger yourself right into the ground where you're just going, oh, look how great it is, like rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic. So I think too much gain thinking or optimism early on in a startup stage, you're dead meat. But later on, as we become maybe more grizzled and like more, gap oriented, I think adapting a little gain optimism into the mix is really healthy. So I think it's contextual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the key right there, is just keeping everything in context. All right, let's hit our last story of the day. This comes to us from CE Pro. And new wave of online attacks means that it's a day that ends in Y, but it's putting connected home devices at risk. It's a flaw known as React to Shell. It's being used in active cyber attacks against connected home devices. In some new data from Bitdefender, over 150,000 attack attempts per day are happening, and it's on your regular cast of characters, smart plugs, IoT appliances, smartphones, NAS and home storage devices, surveillance cameras and systems, routers, smart TVs, and entertainment devices. I don't know what they missed on that list, because that's pretty much everything that we're seeing in homes. Henry, let me come back to you on this one. I kind of joked in jest that this was a day that started in Y because there was new cyber attacks. This is nothing new for us. Are we at a point where when these stories come out, we just go, yeah, okay, and move on with our day and do nothing about it, both internally and for our clients?
I think the conversation is starting to shift, which scares me a little bit, because as CI, we're not experts. We're not cybersecurity experts yet. And they're just starting to be the right who resources in the space. Companies like, my former partner at Parasol, Ted Brimmerkamp, works for an outfit called Spec Ops Secure, and they specialize in cybersecurity for the home. But for me, as a services fan I love recurring revenue. So if we could continue this narrative where people really are bought into the fact that there's digital, that there's not just physical windows and doors on the home, there's digital windows and doors, and get them to the point where they're frothed up enough about it, where they were willing to subscribe to another flavor of security. I think ADT tried this years ago with a product called Canopy.
Yep.
Probably a little early. So I think as we continue to message it, the thing that scares me though is that, like, to take on that liability and to take on that responsibility requires a ton of education and sophistication that we currently don't have. So it's all good and well. It's kind of like the equivalent of, 2019, 2018, all the lighting manufacturers, after having been successful at implementing control in CI, the lighting people come to us and go like, all right, you're lighting people now. And we're like, okay. And some of us have figured it out. Some of us haven't. This is a little different. cybersecurity is not something that I think is very tolerant of any kind of like dilettantish sort of behavior. So I think we need strong dancing partners. I think we are deluding ourselves into thinking we're going to become in-house experts. I say this as an IT guy with like 30 years in IT. Mm-hmm. But I think it'll continue to spin up. And the best thing I think we can hope for is that there are service providers, think like access networks for, managed cybersecurity, who can help us, monetize this. But until that point, I think we're in a serious no man's land where we're not. And then unfortunately, because of Dunning-Kruger, some of us are going to say like, oh yeah, I can do that. Bad idea.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Jeremy, I know how much you love these questions. What do we do with this information, right? Do we craft a press release and send it out to our customers? Do we use it as a sales pitch? Do we ignore it and just continue to do what we normally do with our customers from an IT standpoint? I don't know what we do when this is happening and literally being announced on a weekly basis.
Yeah, the specifics of each attack threat is sort of a little bit much for the communication channel with the client. I think you're almost like you're opening up a can of worms with these clients because they're going to think if they do get hit, it's their fault somehow, the service provider, the integrator. I do think that there was a good list of best practices sort of at the end here that are things that aren't going to get you in trouble, that are more like advisory, aspects to the way networks are set up and IoT devices are separated out and, remote access limited in certain ways. So things that you would want to do as an integrator just to be more diligent. I think those kind of items are still best practices. I still think educating your client about the do's and don'ts of using their devices and network, and basic stuff about passwords and, not using or not clicking on links that you don't know, things that your company tells you, your company IT director tells you, to do or not to do. Passing that along, you would hope that those folks in the home would already have that information, but you can't assume that. So as their technology partner, maybe just add that little layer of, hey, since we got this set up, just a reminder, don't do this, don't do that. And yet these attacks are still going to happen in certain places, and it had nothing to do with any of those things. So I used to laugh that most of what happens were, these, Trojan horse attacks where people are just really kind of tricked into clicking on something they shouldn't have clicked on. Mm-hmm. That's not even what we're at anymore. This is like another level. And I don't think that there's an answer for every contingency that could happen. So unfortunately, we're stuck with just trying to do the best we can as an industry to protect our clients without getting ourselves into that liability aspect that I know you both are fearful of as integrators. But I say all this as I look at a email for I bought a very inexpensive PC so that I could go to learn how to calibrate video projectors, and they couldn't run the software on a Mac, so I had to buy a PC. I didn't resubscribe to the McAfee software, so I keep getting and I was just gonna basically kill this brick this computer because I don't need it anymore. It's like I'm not going to go into the business of calibration. I just wanted to learn how to do it so I could understand it. And now my daughter's using this computer. I'm like, this thing is going to be the end of us. This damn PC, because I know Macs are so much more protected, just naturally. But yeah, so it freaks me out a little bit just thinking about all this stuff.
Yep. All right. Well, since you both mentioned liability, Henry, let me ask you one more question before we go. So there's a Parks Associates survey from 23 that says that 74% of homeowners would pay more for ongoing support if cybersecurity was included. That's wonderful information for our industry to have, but it doesn't touch on what cybersecurity, quote unquote, means. And what it means to a customer is dramatically different than what it means to an integrator. And when you throw the lovely L word of liability into that, as a services guy, how would you sell cybersecurity? Or would you? Or is the liability too great?
I would make sure my wagons were linked together. So, I mean, just like with, Parasol, my liability wagons were linked together, and I had kind of failover, essentially. I could de-risk the situation. With my security business, I've got failover de-risking going on with alarm.com and our central station, Security Central. So I'm going to sell it if I can link my wagon to like a Spec Op Secure. I'm not even sure if that's a solution that they would offer in the way that the homeowner's thinking about it. And by the way, the scary thing is they don't know. What they're really after is peace of mind.
Yeah.
And they really, they know afterwards what it is, because they say, well, my, cameras were hacked or something. But I mean, to Jeremy's point, how often is it spear phishing or something that really has nothing to do with cybersecurity that they're talking about? So it's nothing to do with protecting the house. Like we're the problem. So I think I have no problem with that, but look no further right now than your own insurance company. Any of these folks, if they come to you and they try to sell you a cybersecurity policy or cyber insurance policy, it's hilarious. If you ask, and you ask the poor rep, these poor reps have been selling homeowners insurance and, insurance for, I see you've got some jewelry there. Maybe want to put a rider on that, and then they're like, they've got this little trifold brochure that headquarters told them. I'm like, oh, and they're like, how about some cyber? I'm like, okay, well, let's dig into that. Like, what does that cover? And they're like, well, it's the computer.
The files are in the computer.
And what you realize after a while, because I've dug into some of these policies and the way they're written, the answer is it's kind of a little bit like your disability policy. Like, it kicks in after 5 years, and only if like all your appendages are cut off and you truly are, in a vegetative state. So I think the insurance market has spoken a little bit about this already. There's not a lot of understanding and an attempt to monetize and just a hope that nothing happens. And if you do actually file a claim, the terms of service are so loosely written, it's like Swiss cheese. So, yes, but only if I have a service, an MSP, that I can de-risk to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun one. All right, gentlemen, we are going to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Jeremy, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Projector Central or your podcast, where can they do that?
Go to projectorcentral.com or check me out on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me individually. You could email me, but that's kind of,
Don't do that. That's weird.
Annoying.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
that's weird.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
LinkedIn's a good way to do it. Thanks for having me on. It's been
No problem. Thank you for being here. Henry, my friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Livewire, where can they do that?
At Get Livewire on all the interwebs. And you can email me, but as my kids would say, bruh.
Bruh. Yeah, pretty much. All right. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on most of the socials. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry. What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is Erin Marmoran of EdTech. The world of higher ed AV is growing rapidly. That's why each month we hear from the best and brightest from colleges and universities all over the U.S. Check out EdTech on avnation.tv or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.